gathered to the streets of modern-day Denver, where they invoke the power of literary history to complicate the converging lives of two main characters, Everett Mann, an idealistic marketing guy in a materialistic marriage, and Evelyn Moore, a disquieted woman with visions of a former life. I'm going to start with an excerpt from Ginsberg's The Visions of the Great Rememberer, which is a 1972 commentary on visions of Cody that I think helps explain why Neal Cassady mattered so much to Kerouac and why he remains an important figure in American culture.
And you didn't think I'd show up.
Hey!
Arriving late, as always.
Hey, what an honor. John Allen Cassady. All right, now I'm really motivated. Allen Ginsberg, right here. And why this paean to Neal? It is a consistent panegyric to heroism of mind, to an American person that Whitman sought among large, magnificent, healthy persons. The opposite of the sometimes slothful, sometimes active, selfish, conspicuous consumption Birchite junkie that has run America into a grave like Nixon and all our lost presidents and their supporters. What Whitman wanted, Kerouac celebrated. Someone large-minded as the Tetons and green valleys of Wyoming. One who appreciates the land nature gave us, or we took. Not an exploiter who wants to sit in an air-conditioned office skyscraper trailer, shuffle papers, and sell America down the polluted river as real estate as America was sold. What did the pine trees think of that? Standing in snow-silent armies on rendezvous mountainside. All the tears of it all the deaths for used car salesmen, suffocation of souls for the Pentagon building whilst this Jack's book was writ. Down and down. When she awoke that morning, the grass was wet and soft on Evelyn's skin, the sun shining in her eyes, a breeze tickling the bright green blades that surrounded her. For a moment she felt lost, uncertain of where she was. She sat up, scanned the scene, searching for a reference point and noticing a fence, a scoreboard, busy streets on three sides, high-rises to the west. The sounds of morning traffic cruising by, ambulance sirens screaming in the distance. The scent of dirt and grass mixed with car exhaust. She was barefoot in the outfield grass of a downtown softball field. Then she remembered her lost shoes, Union Station, Neal, Jack, the book in her bag, the train tracks, and a mysterious gap between the moment she had started up the tracks and now. Good morning, darling. She turned to see Neal smiling at her, lying on his side, propped on an elbow, his eyes shining like twin beams of cosmic energy, his hands playing with a spear of grass, Jack lying on one side like a mirror image beside him, except his face was buried in a paperback book. She gazed at Neal's playful eyes, then at Jack, who didn't look up. Then she pulled at her tangled hair with filthy hands. "I've finally lost my mind," she said. "This can't be happening." That's what some would call a matter of perspective. You know, theologians, poets, philosophers, psychologists, or some other such intellectual persons who have studied and might know better about such things than we do, Neal said. sitting up with another smile, blinking and stretching his arms over his head. What? That is exactly the question, my lovely girl. He stood and brushed the dead grass off his t-shirt and jeans, then stared at the softball field surrounding them. You see, we know I'm dead, and Jack here is most certainly long gone as well, and you, my dear, bless your sweet soul, are in reality much older than the gone little bag of bones we see now before our bleary morning eyes. Oh, man. He rubbed his hand on his stomach and looked her over, momentarily distracted by the old drive to seek and conquer the female form. Evelyn rolled her eyes and crossed her arms over her chest, turning away from him. Jack looked up momentarily from his book, his eyes reflecting the sunlight. But as I was saying, Neal continued, glancing at Jack, who returned to his book, our current situation is not as unbelievable as it might seem. If it can't be happening, as you said, my dear Carolyn, Evelyn, she corrected him. He scratched his chin, narrowing his eyes. That's right. And it is indeed an interesting thing. See, you aren't even you in the strictest sense. Wow. Just as I most certainly am not me as I have been in the past. So if this scenario can't be happening, my dear, the only answer as why it is happening is that we are here, back home on this beautiful day in my good old hometown of Denver, awakening on this most holy of softball fields, where I once was quite the local athletic legend as a boy, as you might recall, because someone was writing about our immortal friend Jack here. Dig that. Pacing back and forth in front of them, he shook his head at the weight of the idea, pointing at Jack who, if he was listening, wasn't acknowledging it. Evelyn frowned. This was insane. Do you agree with this? She asked, turning to Jack, who slowly looked up as if in a trance. What do you think? Jack just stared at her, an uneven smirk on his lips. He can't answer, Neal said. It is strange, in fact, Evelyn, dear, but I'm quite sure he is entirely unable to say anything he didn't put down on paper years ago. Yes, I think he has to read in order to speak. Jack smiled. None of this makes any sense, Evelyn said. Then she thought of Everett Mann, remembering their Friday rendezvous. I'm supposed to meet someone tomorrow, a man I saw at a coffee bar this week. I emailed him right before everything changed, right before I ended up here with the two of you. She looked at them with earnest eyes. And I have to make sure I meet him. You sent a what? Neal said, scratching the back of his head. Dear girl, maybe you have lost your mind because you were talking nonsense. She laughed and was about to explain what an email was when Jack sat up, his paperback still in his hand, his eyes suddenly round with joy. A broad grin creasing his face, pointing in wonder at the high-rises in the distance and gazing in amazement at the softball field, at Neal, and finally at Evelyn. The strange young heroes of all kinds, white, colored, Mexican, pure Indian, were on the field, performing with heartbreaking seriousness, he read, looking into her eyes. There you go, Jackie, my boy, lay it down now. Yes, said Neal, his smile fading as he spoke, his voice tapering to silence. Taking note of the way their eyes lingered on each other before Jack continued to read, Neal stopped pacing and kicked at the grass, muttering and walking away from them toward the infield dirt. Happy birthday, Neal Cassady. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, John. Keep your eyes out for that book down in Denver.